That day, it wasn't just raining. It felt like the whole sky was furious, pouring down on me every drop of icy pain. Just like the words my parents had hurled straight at my face. "You're a disgrace," my father roared, his face red as blood. My mother didn't bother yelling. She stood behind the door, her eyes cold like cooled steel, and said one line. "I don't have a daughter who chooses programming over business." The old canvas bag sagged under the rain. I gritted my teeth and zipped up my jacket, my heart numb, but for the first time in my life, I felt relief. My name is Amanda, and this is the story of the day I got kicked out of my home, only to become someone my family never saw coming. I was 18, my hair still damp from high school graduation, and I was already standing in front of the iron gate of our mansion, soaked to the bone, shivering from the cold, aching from words that couldn't be taken back. But I didn't regret it. For 18 years of my life, I had always been the golden child in the script my parents wrote. The perfect heir to Caldwell Ventures, a company that specialized in traditional medical equipment founded by my grandfather in the 70s. They had mapped out my entire path: study business administration at Stanford, intern at the headquarters during summers, and in 3 years, join the board of directors. But I felt suffocated. I loved computers, not the social media addiction my mom sneered at, but a deep obsession with every line of code, every logical system running silently behind the apps. I wanted to be a software engineer. I wanted to build tools that helped people work faster, live easier. I applied to Illinois Institute of Technology, not fancy but with the machine learning program I craved. I did it all myself, wrote the application, applied for a scholarship, and received my acceptance letter with trembling joy. But that joy was crushed the moment I placed the letter on the dinner table that night. My father, Mr. Charles Caldwell, didn't even get through the second line. "A programmer. Amanda, this isn't a game." Before I could respond, my mother cut in, her voice as cold as winter air. "If you're not going to Stanford, don't come back here, you're on your own." I stayed silent. I thought they were just angry. But 3 days later, when I came back from my coding prep class, my dad was blocking the doorway, holding a suitcase I hadn't even packed. "You chose this path, then walk it. You won't get a cent from me. No tuition, no home, no inheritance. Got it?" I gripped the handle of the bag, looked into the eyes I used to fear, and for the first time, didn't cry. "Fine. I'll go." They thought I would scream, beg, crawl back inside that night. But I didn't. I turned away. Each step out of that big gate, where a private driver used to wait for me every morning, felt like my chest might break. Now it was just me, the rain, and a road disappearing into the dark. I didn't know if my mom watched from the window, or if my dad noticed how my hands trembled while I jammed the key into the ignition of that beat-up car I borrowed from a classmate. But I knew one thing. They would never look at me as their daughter again. And somehow that felt like breathing. I left the fancy suburbs of Chicago with no destination beyond a cheap student apartment I found on Craigslist. I had nothing but an old laptop, a few soaked clothes, and a wild determination to prove them wrong. Not with words. With action. They said I'd fail, come crawling back in tears. They never understood me. And they'd never seen me fight for real. I slept on a couch, too short for my height, in a tiny studio apartment owned by Rachel, a classmate I met at a STEM camp in 11th grade. It was on the 3rd floor, no elevator, and reeked of mold on the wallpapered yellow walls. But it was more than shelter. It was my beginning. "You sure about this? Your parents really aren't coming back for you?" Rachel once asked, as I pulled out my beat-up laptop and started typing at midnight. I smiled without looking up. They didn't kick me out to take me back, and I'm not going back to beg. During the day, I worked the register at an electronics store near campus, always short-staffed with grumpy customers. It wasn't a dream job. I got yelled at for not knowing the newest cables, forced into unpaid overtime, watched like I might steal a whole shelf of headphones. But I endured it. At night, I changed into a different uniform, hopped on a rusty bike and delivered pizza for a local shop. Rain, snow, darkness. I rode through all of it, gripping my phone for directions, heart pounding at every major unlit intersection. And late nights? Those were mine. Rachel went to bed at 11 a.m. I opened my laptop and picked up where I left off. I studied from free courses on Coursera, Udemy, anywhere I could learn how to build backends, handle APIs, or design user interfaces that didn't scare people off. Sometimes my eyes burned from fatigue. Some nights, I fell asleep at the kitchen table, waking up at 5 a.m. with keyboard marks on my forehead. But I never stopped. I had no money, no connections, no backup from anyone. But I had something my parents never saw in me. 6 months later, on a January evening, I stared at the screen, heart pounding. The app I'd built, a tool for students to share and track their study habits, finally worked. It was still full of bugs, and the interface looked like it came straight out of 2002, but it ran. And I could use it to log study time, set reminders, and connect with friends. I posted it on a student forum, not expecting much. Just 3 days later, over 1,200 downloads. And an email. From Garrett Thomas, CTO, SparkForge. The message was brief. Hi Amanda. I tried your Study Sync app. The concept has real potential. We're looking for independent thinkers like you. Are you free to meet next week? I read that email at least 10 times, thinking it was a prank. But no. Garrett was real, SparkForge was real. A small tech startup, developing project management solutions for universities. On the day of the interview, I borrowed a dress shirt from Rachel, pinned my hair back, and told myself not to shake. SparkForge's office was inside a renovated warehouse on the city's west side. Not fancy, but full of energy. Garrett was younger than I expected. He wore a hoodie, held a cup of coffee, and asked me just one question. Can you show me how you handled user data without using external libraries? I pulled out my laptop and walked him through it in 10 minutes. Garrett nodded. Good. You start Monday. Junior project developer, part-time. Flexible hours. Pay's not great, but you'll learn a lot. I could hardly believe it. Not because of the money, but because I, a girl kicked out of her house, with no fancy degree, no real-world experience, was chosen by a tech company for my actual skills. And I wasn't going to waste that chance. 3 months later, I was promoted to full-time. 6 months after that, I became lead developer on a team building an AI-powered academic performance monitoring tool. I studied like crazy, DevOps, data security. I read technical reports instead of watching Netflix. Every day I arrived at the office a little earlier, stayed a little later. For the first time, I had enough money not to sleep on a sofa anymore. I rented a small room just for me, white walls, a window facing the street, and a real desk. And there, in those quiet nights, I started to think bigger. Not just writing code for someone else, but creating something of my own. A data management system for nonprofit organizations. The idea came after I helped a community group fix their grant tracking spreadsheet. So messy and outdated, it felt like it came from the Stone Age. I started sketching it out, line by line, every feature, every security protocol. I knew it wasn't a $1 million product, but it was mine. And I would turn it into something the world had to recognize, not because I was Charles Caldwell's daughter, but because I was Amanda. And I had started over from zero. I don't remember the exact moment the idea took shape, just that it hit like a jolt of electricity in the middle of the night, while I was debugging a messy chunk of code in SparkForge's system. A bad data point had thrown the whole dashboard off, and I had to rewrite the entire data filtering algorithm from scratch. And I thought, why isn't there a smarter tool to fix this automatically? That idea stuck with me for weeks, clung to me like the bitterness I carried the day I left home. And just like that feeling, I couldn't ignore it. 2 years after my first day at SparkForge, I submitted my resignation. Garrett looked at me like I'd just announced I was flying to the moon in a car. You've got a solid position, a great team, good pay, a growing future, Why walk away? I took a deep breath. Because I don't want to spend my whole life building someone else's product, I want to build mine, from the ground up. I started with a messy sketch, an AI-integrated business management toolkit that could automatically analyze data, forecast internal trends, detect operational bottlenecks, and suggest improvement strategies. I called it Aether IQ because I believed data, when handled right, could bring something close to intuition to a business. Rachel, my former roommate, now working as a finance manager at a small education nonprofit, was the first person to test the prototype. "Amanda, this thing is insane," she texted after the software suggested she cut printing costs and go fully digital. "It even knew I forget to pay my quarterly service bills, and it knew. It didn't guess." I knew I had hit the right niche. So, I dove into building. I slept 4 hours a night, spent every remaining minute coding, reading research, learning more about machine learning models. I hired a small team of freelancers, used my savings to invest in UI and security. No restaurants, no new clothes, no social media. The world out there was loud. But I had one goal. 9 months later, Aether IQ launched its beta version. 30 small and medium-sized businesses signed up for the trial. 23 of them came back and signed 3-month contracts. 7 companies posted reviews, and one of those landed in the hands of an angel investor. His name was Harvey Mitchell, founder of Quasar Capital. A bald man with glasses and a bluntness that could cut steel. But when he met me during the pitch, he asked just one question. "If I gave you $1 million, what's the first thing you'd do?" I didn't hesitate. Hire the best AI team in Chicago and set up a dedicated data testing center. I don't need a fancy office. I need computing power and brains. He laughed and signed. Finally, someone who understands what matters. 1 year later, Aether IQ officially rebranded as Neural Wave Systems, and I was the founder and CEO. We landed a contract with a national logistics chain, then a small bank in Ohio, then a pharmaceutical startup. Word spread fast. Venture capitalists called non-stop. I was in meetings with 3 to 5 potential partners every day, auditing infrastructure security, reviewing legal documents, and hiring more people. Within 18 months, my company was valued at $18 million. 3 months after that, the number jumped to $52 million. I didn't fly private. I still lived in a rented apartment, though now it was a brighter space, with a balcony overlooking Lake Michigan. I still wore hoodies, ate ramen, and brewed my own coffee. Every dollar, every single one went back into the product, into people, into the future. That's when I heard from Ethan, an old friend from SparkForge, who had left out of frustration with management and was looking for a new opportunity. I invited him to lunch. "I'm looking for someone clear-headed enough to run the machine I'm building, not a backup CEO." Ethan nodded in less than 5 minutes. "When do I start?" We rented a small office on the 27th floor of a tech building in downtown Chicago. It had windows overlooking the river, a decent coffee machine, and a whiteboard always covered in messy handwriting. On the first day, standing in front of the Neural Wave Systems logo on the glass door, I said nothing. Ethan nudged my shoulder, smiling. "You don't have to say anything, just keep doing the things that leave the world speechless." I smiled, but inside, I was shouting. "Mom, Dad, you thought I'd crumble. But I built an empire out of everything you threw away. Dreams, grit, and the pain of being rejected." I was in my office, a bright space with glass walls looking out over downtown Chicago, when Ethan walked in, holding his iPad with a look he couldn't hide. "Amanda, you need to see this." I glanced at the screen. It was a stock chart. A sharp line, plummeting. Caldwell Ventures. I paused for a second, like someone had said the name I'd long buried. Then I swiveled my chair and crossed my arms. "How much?" Ethan replied without missing a beat. "Almost 70% in 8 months. Internal rumors say they're running out of liquidity." Caldwell Ventures, the company my father always boasted about as a generational legacy, the foundation stronger than any passing technology. A company that made traditional medical equipment, surviving on outdated contracts and processes that hadn't changed since the last decade. While the world was stepping into the age of AI, they were still using Excel to log orders and sending faxes. I opened their public financial report. Every line felt like a knock on the door from collapse. Revenue was dropping consistently. Operating costs had doubled due to supply chain failures. Short-term debts remained unresolved. And worst of all, there wasn't a single investment in digital transformation.